Welcome to the Naavik Gaming Podcast, where it is our mission to explore the business and future of video games. We bring together the industry's brightest builders, investors, and thinkers to keep a pulse on current events, dissect emerging trends in games, share lessons learned, and have a great time. This podcast is also part of Naavik's growing ecosystem, which ranges from free and premium research to consulting and advisory services. For more information, visit www.naavik.co. Now, let's jump into the episode. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Aaron Bush, and today's episode is going to be a lot of fun. I'm joined by my friend, Piers Kicks. Piers is a founding partner at Delphi Ventures, a venture partner for BITKRAFT, and is a board member of the Blockchain Game Alliance. You may have heard Piers on this podcast before, or on his own Metaverse Musings show. And he also has collaborated on awesome content with Naavik in the past, including his epic Into the Void, where crypto meets the metaverse piece from 2020, and also including our more recent joint report titled The Great Reset, Your 2023 Guide to Web3 Games. I'll include both of those links in the show notes. But Piers, welcome back to the pod.
It's great to be back. It's always a pleasure chatting with you and also the broader Naavik team. Super excited, for the few pieces that we've been able to sort of do together now, and eager to keep the conversation rolling even through the bear market. So let's get after it.
Yes, always lots of fun, no matter what's going on in the market. So there's also a lot we're going to dig into today. We're going to talk about our most anticipated Web3 games, what modern founders are doing differently to stand out. And I have a fun game we'll play later on in the episode. But to start, Piers, I actually want to begin with a topic that we both have in common, which is that despite our different backgrounds and geographies and focuses, we both dropped out of school to become professional investors. And then we segued that career into an intersection with gaming, me with Naavik and you as a VC with Delphi and BITKRAFT. And there's a couple of reflections I want to get to here. But to start, would you mind quickly sharing how your professional journey started and where it's gone so far?
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of lucky enough to have kind of stumbled across crypto, pretty young, mainly through the lens of video games, which is kind of where things started out for me with RuneScape and gold farming back in the day. So I always felt very fortunate that I had like an eye on that, and it was something that I was very excited about. I just finished school and was kind of, debating, cracking on with my life or going and sort of exploring. I remember going for dinner with my parents and asking if they'd give me their blessing to go and live down on a beach in Costa Rica and do some surfing. But thankfully, opted to go and sort of study. Was studying computer science and philosophy, but I only made it about 3 months. I was, very sort of eager to get going, let's say back then. I think obviously sort of 2017 time this was, with sort of crypto going the way it was. It was a pretty exciting time with, all sorts of absurd price actions. I'm sure folks around then would have remembered sort of altcoin chasing and whatnot back in the day, many sleepless nights. And yeah, I'd been spending a lot of time sort of researching that space, and a good friend of mine who, we'd been discussing a lot of the stuff that we've been up to, had basically met two sort of investors out in Seville in Spain, and suggested that I sort of fly out and meet with them because they were super interested in kind of learning more about the space. And I did so. We ended up, having a long sort of dinner. It ended up being about, 4 a.m. on a Wednesday night in Seville. Wow. And we were still chatting about all of this stuff. And they kind of said to me, would I be willing when I finished my studies to go and, set something up with them? We'd been sort of, diving deep in all of the things that have been exciting me about the space, how it could unfold. And, I think I remember speaking to my dad back then. I don't know whether he'd told me this before, but it's one of his lines that has always stuck with me. He said when I broached the idea of cracking on with what was exciting me and what I felt like I really wanted to do ultimately anyway. He said that you can't catch the wave if you're not in the water, which I really liked. Surfing analogy there, and I don't know. I'd always had a desire to jump in at the deep end. You and I were discussing just now, sort of. how lucky I've felt, how lucky we felt to always know what it is that we're excited about. And for me, that was crypto. That was, it was obviously less clear then, but kind of the fusion with games and crypto were really the two loves. And so it made a ton of sense for me to do so. So kind of kicked off there, jumped in at the deep end, spent a lot of time, exploring different jurisdictions for setting the fund up, sort of managing these early funds on behalf of these two investors. And kind of grew into it over time, not really having any idea when I jumped in, and meeting lots of fantastic people and role models along the way, learning lots of hard lessons, having lots of, major excitements in that period too. Eventually that led me to sort of meeting Jose, one of the Delphi partners out in Paris, who I'm lucky enough to call, a best friend these days. We've had all sorts of adventures together. I guess sort of like 6 or 7 months after that, I think, is when we met the 5 original Delphi founders who had all dropped out of Wall Street and were trying to bring this kind of institutional grade analysis to crypto. Let's say there was a strong culture fit, and we sort of, started exploring, what working together could look like. And that's kind of, what led us to where we are.
Awesome. And I know that we have a bunch of aspiring young people, college students and young professionals that listen to our show. And even though your path is unique, I'm curious what you learned about charting a different course so young from what is standard. Like, what were the good and the bads of doing that? Or if you were to just kind of talk to other young people about charting their own paths, how would you help them think through that?
Yeah. I don't know. From my perspective, it's always kind of been like the whole university angle. In this day and age, I don't really think it's like a meaningful means of distinction unless you're like gunning for like, truly S tier, like, top end universities. I think it's like a path that's so well trodden that it's like extremely uninteresting. I think the world is moving so quickly in so many different directions that, being able to leverage the internet, both as a learning device, as leverage, right? As a distribution channel, like it is easier than ever to, find something that you love, that you're excited about, and lean into it. Start off just reading what other people are putting out. If you start building your own ideas on it, your own thesis on things, then, invite others to talk with you. I think putting together even blog posts, Twitter threads, a podcast, if you like building that proof of work, if you like, of building a portfolio of thoughts of yours that you're sharing online that you can point to if an opportunity to present itself. I think that's so important. I think it's an enormously exciting time to be alive for that. There's this idea of sort of digital serendipity, right? Like engineer greater surface area online for randomness to happen, and kind of maximize that surface area of opportunity. And I think that's what I'd say. Like I have, so many awesome friends who are really talented and really passionate about certain things, but no one would ever know it. You know what I mean? It's like use the internet to, in your own like small place, in your own small corner of the internet, like start just making your own thoughts clearer on something by writing, right? I think that's a massive forcing function for clarity of thought. And I mean, you can't guarantee it in life, as you can't guarantee anything, but the odds are someone will kind of stumble across that. Or as I say, if you want to be more active in your approach, if you want to look at firms that are investing or building in the space that excites you, you can, reach out and say, this is what I've done, this is what I think about X, Y, and Z. And like that to me is like a really exciting, initial footing. Those are kind of my thoughts there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Especially don't necessarily make your credentials actual credentials, make it your work that showcases your merit. And you can, through the internet, through writing and such, you can use that as a tool to learn, but also just to show to other people what you got. And my story, similarly, I kind of got my first fortunate step forward after being pseudonymous on investing discussion boards and, slowly evolving from asking dumb questions to answering questions to posting analyses until people, started paying attention. And then they learned, later who I was and such. But having that like body of work on the internet that people see definitely was a huge step forward. I guess like a couple more reflections from my end, and then I'm curious what you think, and then we can kind of move forward to the other topics. But one is that every time I've deviated from what is normal. People have told me that it's risky. Like dropping out of school or a job is like always being risky because it's not the normal thing to do. But I've learned that the way that many people think about risk is often wrong, because for one, I think there was always too much focus on what you are leaving, like what you are dropping out of, and not enough on what you are dropping into. And if you have something great to drop into, it doesn't have to be like out of school. Like it could be like anything that you're doing at any point in life, right? It's possible to like both minimize risk and increase opportunity compared to sticking to where you are. And people often forget that the worst thing that could happen is just going back to where you started. Like honestly, there normally isn't actually that much risk to doing something different, because if it doesn't work, you could just go the other path, or reset. And the second thing that I learned is that, like, even so, especially when you're young, there are very real trade-offs to making decisions. Some are good, like you mentioned, like university. Like instead of like paying for school, you can get paid to do work, and bypass a lot of like student loans and things that a lot of people would normally have to take on, which is great, and just get a head start in terms of like the years that you can dedicate to work if that's what you're interested to. But on the other hand, at least for me, I don't know if it was for you, but it was social suicide for a while. When everyone your own age is off doing something else, normally in these massive clusters of school and whatnot. And so it kind of had to go into monk mode a little bit and just kind of like really drill in on yourself and learn and improve for a while. And then eventually life catches up with you again, and in other ways. And that definitely
Absolutely.
had some good times and bad times. But anyways, a couple reflections there.
No, I totally agree on a number of those. I like, obviously the kind of, locking in properly. Like one of the things I really struggled with for sure was the whole like grass is always greener psychology, right? Like as soon as I, had dropped out and saw all my friends doing this, that, and the other, I was like, wow, am I like missing out on like key sort of experiences you're going to have as part of growing up? But my conclusion was absolutely not. Honestly, I was living in different countries, like for, many periods, wouldn't see my close friends for a year or two or whatever. And it's like, dare I say it, nothing ever really changes. Like if people you grew up with, like those that you love and care about, like I think they're always going to be there. And then, I think the other thing I'd say on that is like being comfortable, like being alone and putting in the grind and like actually giving yourself the time to be alone with your thoughts and like really decide what it is you feel about the world and what excites you, and really like kind of hone in on like what your thesis is on what excites you is so important. I find so many, friends I know are like terrified of being alone, as in like not being alone longer term, but like spending time alone. And it's like actually a really important thing that I think, most people would generally benefit from. And then to your point about, being able to take those risks when you're younger, like especially someone, entertaining going straight into university, as you say, the opportunity is likely still there a year later. Like when we talk about making asymmetric bets and asymmetric opportunities, like that really is one. I always love the Latin quote. I won't try and quote it in Latin, but, fortune favors the brave, fortune favors the bold. And I do think, jumping in and, putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation where there's going to be like maximal learning, you know what I mean, is something that's actually like thrilling, like scary, but thrilling. And, I'm sure that there are many examples of where it hasn't worked out. But I mean, you don't want to be the person that never tried, right?
Yeah. Well, I could talk about this probably the full hour with you, Piers, but we're 12 minutes in, so let's get moving to some other topics that people probably signed up to listen into.
Yeah.
Which is games. So let's talk about Web3 games. And I don't know about you, Piers, but I'm kind of tired about a lot of the Web3 discussion feeling so serious lately, especially ever since the fallout started happening a couple of years ago. Everything around regulations, nitpicking, tokenomics, the boom and bust, all of that. So let's have some fun with this. We both prepared our top 5 most anticipated blockchain and Web3 games. We don't know what the other person has picked, and we'll go in reverse order starting at number 5. But I thought it would be fun to get a pulse on what we're each excited about, and it could make for an interesting watch list for all of our listeners. So Piers, If you're ready, let's start with you. What is your number 5?
I'd say, obviously always tricky ranking these things, right? I must caveat by saying that. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a strong sort of like ordering to them per se, because a lot of these I'm, generally excited about. But I'd say, yeah, number 5 is one which I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with by now, is Ember Sword, which, super exciting sort of blockchain MMORPG that's taken inspiration from a ton of the games that I love. They built some really insane sort of browser engine technology that optimizes for, low-end hardware. And I think if you look at how demographics have skewed so far in terms of, gamer profiles that are most excited about some of the unique affordances of these technologies, I think it's a very, sensible thing to have done. And yeah, the recent playtests and whatnot have been super, super dope. So excited to see what comes.
Sweet. I have not seen the playtest or been involved, so I didn't put this one on my list, but I know it looks good from a distance. So I think that's an exciting one to have on this list. My number 5 is a slight cop-out. It's whatever the Avalon team is building. Avalon raised $13 million in a round led by BITKRAFT this year to build out a platform with Web3 and UGC capabilities. And as I read it, the team is looking to build essentially a AAA MMO on top of this platform. And I do think that MMOs have real potential with Web3 elements, and building a platform in a way where people can have different types of MMO experiences or mod-like experiences more in one spot will actually make a lot of the interoperability that makes some of these Web3 pieces more interesting actually possible. There's obviously so much we don't know about this project. And with projects like this that are so ambitious, anything could happen, hence me putting it number 5 on my list and not higher up. But even just personally, just from like a fun standpoint, like this is the kind of game, more of like an MMO with more like in-depth features that like lend themselves to player ownership, where even like across different experiences, you can kind of share assets and stuff. This sounds really compelling to me, so I'm just excited to see what this team comes up with in the next couple of years. Also, one of the founders created EverQuest, so they got some real talent behind this team that's familiar with what makes a good MMO. So that is my number 5.
Yeah, Avalon's actually on my list as well, so maybe I'll put that at my 4. I completely agree. I think, obviously everyone that's building and investing in games loves games, but it's like there's a certain degree to which some people really, cut them and they bleed games. And it's like the entire team sort of, chemistry and like love for games is pretty fascinating. And yeah, I mean, some of the early kind of like vertical slices that we've seen look pretty amazing. So yeah, I'm enormously excited to see where Avalon goes, and completely agree in terms of, suitability of games of this type to, some of these sort of crypto loops, if we like. And yeah, the kind of UGC aspect of these and, the builder piece of these is like pretty exciting. I'm very excited to see where all that goes. So that maybe I'll put that as my 4. I don't know if you want to go to the next one, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go into my next one. I doubt it is the last one that will overlap. Actually, I'll let you go. I don't want to overlap with you again in case it happens. What's number 3 on your list?
Number 3 on my list. Well, it's annoying. I've been really struggling to narrow things down, but I'll say one that is still pretty early on, still pretty stealth. Is called Cambria, and basically this project is everything I ever wanted, I think, in terms of, my younger self growing up and whatnot. I spent decades in RuneScape at this point, and basically it's really leaning into this whole thesis of like, crypto already is this sort of MMORPG unfolding on chain, if you like. And so what they're trying to do is build like a front end basically to this permissionless stack of protocols in crypto. So drawing on mechanics from, stuff like old school RuneScape, things that have really stood the test of time, something that's kind of nostalgic of that, time that many of us sort of grew up online and whatnot. And yeah, leveraging the stack that is crypto to allow people to, do things like in the Jewel Arena stake 1v1, sort of any combination of fungible and non-fungible tokens, some really amazing, like large scale sort of concurrent PvP loops, right? So you kind of have like guild wars effectively where you're trying to, or clan wars, if you like, where you're trying to control these obelisks in the wilderness that are sort of, emitting resources that you need to control. I think it has all of these amazing ingredients, like enough that I think, it's super exciting, and it's really gonna strike a nerve in terms of like nostalgia that people feel for that time in these types of games. But it's that like quirky, exciting, nimble sort of setup that I love, because that's where this weird emergent behavior forms in these types of communities, and I'm super excited to see what comes from it over the coming years.
Cool. I actually did not know much of anything about this game, so exciting to see it pop up on your list. Taught me something. I bet many other people it's new for them too. My number 4 is I'm not 100% sure how to say it. Aurori. And this game is Solana based. It uses collectible NFT characters and essentially a turn-based tactics game, and it lets players experience the world through both a single-player story and competitive PvP. It's also, it very much embraces its blockchain Web3 roots, and like kind of like embedding the terminology sort of as like jokes throughout, like how the gameplay comes across and how like the story around it unfolds and such. And I don't think this is going to be like the biggest like AAA kind of game ever, but it seems to have like a pretty compelling team behind it that's been working on it for quite some time now. And as I have, at least from a distance, started to see it come together, I think it's turning out to be potentially pretty interesting. We covered the game in a previous Game Radar deconstruction in Naavik Pro, and we found the game design to be relatively straightforward and fun, and the tokenomics to have showcased pretty above average thoughtfulness to what we were running into with other projects. And there's probably a bunch of new details here that I need to get caught up on, but I think at least parts of this game are shipping pretty soon, and because it's straightforward and seemingly pretty well made, it's one that probably people can check out sooner than later and have a pretty fun time playing. So that is my number 4 on my list. I don't know if you have any comments on that one, or I can just jump into my number 3 and catch up with you, Piers.
Yeah, I'm honestly out the loop on the latest updates from Aurori, but I will say it's something that we looked at very early on, and ended up sort of not doing deal wise. But I've been super impressed with the updates that I was abreast of. Caught up with the team maybe 6 months ago, and was very pleasantly surprised by how cool that was looking. So definitely eager to see how that one evolves as well.
Great. My number 3 is Shrapnel. Shrapnel is an extraction shooter game built on the Unreal Engine 5, and it seems to be about as good of a bet of any shooter game in Web3 to stick the landing in some way, at least that I have seen so far. And actually, kind of the shooter genre maybe doesn't lend itself as much to Web3, just given the kinds of economies these games tend to have, and how you typically don't want assets getting in the way of like even competitive gameplay. But I'm pretty bullish on extraction shooters right now, for one. And what I've seen from this game, the feedback on the playtest has been pretty positive, and the NFT aspects of the game seem more cosmetic and don't really get in the way of the gameplay themselves, which I think is like a nice directional step that many of these types of games need to go. And this is an early mover and doing that. I do have maybe some hesitance around the broader token strategy and staking, and how like the value like really is or should be captured there, and how that will then intersect with how the game actually works. And of course, like teams like this are treading new water and trying to figure that out themselves. But the game itself looks fun. So just as like a player who wants more extraction shooter games and wants to like see how the intersection of like shooters and Web3 can actually come together in interesting ways, I have this one on my list. According to the roadmap, they say the launch is in Q4 this year, but I don't actually know if that's going to happen. It could be more next year. but that was number 3
Yeah,
on my list.
That one might be some kind of soft launch if we see it this year. But I totally agree. I think super exciting project. Team has been pretty relentlessly heads down. It's been awesome to see it come together. So quickly. Already the early playables. I was play testing it out at GDC, which was great fun. To my utter dismay, in my first playtest, they didn't tell me that there's a bleed out mechanic that you need to patch yourself up, otherwise you're bleeding out. And so I was there hoovering up for a moment, and then all of a sudden I keeled over dead. But I agree, super excited to see where that goes. And I think also there's like, as you say, it's like not intrusive, the crypto implementation, which is like kind of hard to do, I think, around shooters. I agree. There's like a number of ways one could go about it. But yeah, I mean, excited to see where they land with it. And I also think that the sort of UGC elements that they're introducing, I know everyone's always talking about UGC, but I do think if you're in the context of weapon designs or map designs or even like game modes and stuff, it's like really interesting to hand those things over to the community and see what comes. And when you do have like strong, like, community governance aspects and the ability for people to meaningfully vote. And, over time we start talking about royalties through these different creator pieces. Like if they can nail the core game mechanics, if they can establish themselves as like a go-to shooter platform, it's like, because of the warm embrace of the community building aspects in terms of UGC and whatnot. Like I do think it could be really, really exciting over time. So yeah, eager to see where that one goes. My equivalent, actually, then I was going to do Midnight Society and Dead Drop, but here we go. The other shooter, which is in the ring. Again, like I think this one, part of my excitement about it is like definitely, well, first of all, I think the game's really, really fun to play. I've been loving messing around with all the early builds on that, and the sniping feels great in particular. I like the idea of like sort of vertical battle royale. I think it's an interesting game direction. I like the map design, even though I think it's almost way too big at the moment, but we'll see where we get to as the servers kind of fill out more. But predominantly, I love Dr. Disrespect. I think he's an awesome brand. I think he really understands like, the future of where IP and brands can go, right? Dr. Disrespect has built this persona that, really will outlive him. It's not about the guy behind it. It's about the bombastic dude with his shades and his mustache and his vest, right? And I think that's really smart when we start thinking about, how things are going to evolve in the future and how you can perpetuate IP across many different digital environments. Like we kind of touched on leverage of the internet earlier on. I think it's a really smart way that he's built his brand. I think, I'm bullish Dr. Disrespect and excited to see where he goes and like, steering his audience towards this stuff. Like for an individual creator to like take a big stand on something like this publicly early on is like, I think, commendable. It's not easy to do. Like you have reply guys, nonstop down his throat even now. And so, yeah, let's see where it goes. But it's been cool to see even at GDC out at that event, getting a bunch of, streamers involved and actual players like getting this thing going and like starting to introduce people to this space more. So, yeah, there we go. 2 shooters, slightly different approaches, but excited to see both of them come to fruition.
So it was Dead Drop. That was the name of the game.
Yeah. Midnight Society is the studio and Dead Drop is the game.
Right. Cool. Yeah, I haven't seen much about that game yet. Obviously know of Midnight Society, but glad to hear that you're super bullish on them. My number 2 is Illuvium. Illuvium is an interconnected universe of games, 3 to start, maybe more later. This includes an open world exploration game, an industrial city builder, and an auto battler. And I think it does operate on Immutable X, which of course is built on Ethereum. There's a big, seemingly talented team behind this project. And what they're building genuinely looks pretty high quality. But what stands out a lot to me here is that at Naavik, we've generally been pretty critical on specific token and economy design implementations. A lot of Web3 games have had some flaws, and especially the more like blockchain components and the more token components you throw in, the harder it is to get all of those pieces to work together because it ratchets up the complexity. But when we looked at Illuvium, we thought, you know what, this one could actually work and stick the landing and its token and economy designs. And that's saying something because this game is heavily tokenized, even with land, and is driven by a DAO and does push some boundaries on how interoperability works within its games. So it's very novel in a lot of ways and does a lot of different things, but it appears to be super thoughtful across all of it. And obviously, there still is a lot here that needs to be proven out. Making 3+ games is hard, and being live and maintaining all of that and still getting it to work together across all of that is going to be a big task to do well. But from what we've seen so far, we like it, and I'm looking forward, just as a gamer, to checking out the different pieces and seeing how they all intersect, overlap, and all of that when it gradually goes live in the months ahead. So that is my number 2. Piers,
Yeah,
any thoughts on that, or feel free to jump into your number 1?
100%. I think Illuvium has just been the most amazing example I've seen of like guys that didn't come from a video game development background, but just love gaming, building something, which really has momentum. And I think, it is very ambitious. I think the scope almost worries me, but it's awesome to see it all coming together. I think, the playable stuff that's out already has been amazing. I think, they're really demonstrating what can be done in terms of like funding options, of leaning into crypto. I think their land sale that they did last year raised $72 million in like 24 hours or whatever it was, 72 hours maybe. It's been really amazing to see. So yeah, I'm excited to see where that goes. Think they're an awesome team that, just don't stop shipping on this stuff. I mean, obviously it's tricky to stick to timelines, etc. Like game development broadly. And I think, when you sort of adding more ideas like as you go as well, and like really sort of scopes expanding as well, like it's been tricky to sort of manage from that perspective, but it's all coming together, and I totally agree. Very excited on that one. My next one I'd touch on, which is like, can't really share that much on, largely because I don't have full details on it because it's still work in progress. But the CCP Games guys announced that they're doing a blockchain focused game. For those that don't know, the creators of EVE Online, right, which is like one of the longest running sort of virtual economies ever. And I just having been lucky enough to spend time with that team and digest a bunch of the materials they put out over the years as well. I just, in terms of like the philosophy of games and really from first principles, understanding, how to calibrate these economies, how to make one of these games that actually can, persist across multiple decades, that, really was the site of some of the most crazy and exciting like early online multiplayer stuff. I strongly encourage everyone to read Empires of Eve. It's a history of the great wars of EVE Online from 2003 to 2008, and there's a second part as well. The thing reads like an actual science fiction book or some kind of like geopolitical strategy book. It's insane. It's so how, it's like just the full spectrum of like human emotion, like on display that manifested between, I don't know, it was maybe like 10 to 20,000 players across like 5-6 years in, the mid noughties when, while I was still growing up, and like, knowing that these guys built that, having spent time with them and understanding the insights that are gleaned from being one of the first people to chart the uncharted, so to speak, I just think they are formidably well equipped to actually properly design open economies, because they've been able to do one that has endured for so long. And I think they're legends. I'm planning to head out to Iceland this September for the 20-year anniversary of the servers going online, which is pretty crazy. So that would be my number 2. But as I say, there's not a ton of like details on it out yet, but it's in the works. It's been announced at least.
This is your number 2?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this was my number 1, and I don't know how you couldn't put this game.
Well, I said
number 1.
The rankings are arbitrary. As I said already, I already made my disclaimer.
Sure.
Go for it.
But no, this one was definitely my number 1, even though I know basically nothing about it so far. Just because it's from the EVE Online team, and EVE Online is like would have been like the perfect playground for so much of these blockchain Web3 capabilities that we talk about today. And so, yeah, definitely super excited to see what they come up with here. There isn't too much to discuss about this right now, but totally echo your thoughts that the Empires of Eve book, I haven't read the second one yet, but it's really good. It reads like real history, which is crazy. But is so interesting, and I kind of wish that I was older so that I could be in the middle of that back in those like the early days, especially. Um, so I definitely, whatever this next one is, I kind of want to be in the next version of the wars or so. I definitely had my Piers. I don't know if you ever played Tribal Wars, that
Never.
browser game back in the day.
No, I
No.
didn't.
Okay. It basically it was like a big grid where your like little town is like one part of this massive grid, and there are all these other players that have all these other towns, and you team up as tribes to basically like go at war with everyone else and take over the map basically. And there was like one summer when I was in middle school where I had my tribe of like 100 people. Like I maxed it out, and I was like the general going to war. No one knew I was, like 13 years old or whatever. And it was like the best time I ever had in my life. And I have a feeling that's probably what a lot of the EVE Online players were doing. And it really is like an unmatched experience once you're into it, and part of these like massive teams coordinating together. And so being able to recreate something like that with more modern tech and provide like true ownership and like even truer stakes for people who are going to war, that's really exciting. This game, CCP raised money specifically for the game, not for like the company as a whole. So I'm curious to see what that turns into. I'm guessing it probably gets tokenized in some way as part of a broader community. I'm not sure. But yeah, that was my number one. Super excited about it. I'm trying to think, Piers, have you said your number one, or have you been through all five yet?
I don't think so. I don't think so, no. I kind of want to touch on a bonus one afterwards as well, because it's not strictly a game. But I'm also cheating a bit here, but I really would like, for those that haven't come across this yet, just to spend some time exploring it. It's less a game. It's more so a thesis, an idea that multiple people are working towards. And, it's been touched on a lot, like if you're in the space, but this whole notion of like fully on-chain, maximally on-chain games and autonomous worlds, right? The idea that you can build a game environment, a game world where all aspects of, its logic and state are sort of stored on-chain. I think this idea of, being able to release this virtual world that can outlive its creators and can actually persist across, multiple decades. Obviously, being fully on chain, it leans like fully into the ethos of crypto, the composability, the forkability, like all of the things that are so exciting about crypto in terms of its like open source nature with, finance rails and financial aspects baked in, really come alive when you start entertaining this thesis. So I'd strongly recommend people check out like Lattice and Topology, like to name a couple. But yeah, Lattice, sort of OX Park, like a bunch of stuff that, Justin Glibet has been working on, some of the guys that built Dark Forest to begin with. Like it's super exciting. And don't get me wrong, I think like the addressable market for these things is like still unclear because they skew towards highly technical in nature, because you need to do all sorts of cryptography and coding if you want to be competitive at these early ones. And obviously there's a ton of technical execution risk, right? The state of the art of where these systems are at is a long way away from where it needs to be. But it's just the most exciting vision, I think, for how like virtual worlds, game worlds can evolve is if we can get towards that ideal in the fullness of time. So wanted to shout that out. And then, I said another one, that a bonus one. It's not a game, but it's a platform that I'm super excited about. I think a lot of people feel kind of alienated when they're even trying to engage with the crypto game space, especially if, they're not in the weeds and willing to put up with all the crap that comes with it. But yeah, there's a project called Hyperplay, which is basically one of the sort of like MetaMask co-founders who built, a ton of amazing stuff over there, has decided that he wants to focus the next chapter on this. And it's basically trying to build that fully trusted storefront, right? Where you have ring fencing of private keys for game sessions. You can have like sort of social overlay, like all the stuff you'd expect from a more integrated games ecosystem. And it incorporates sort of the Epic Games Store and GOG on the back end. It's a really exciting project. And I just feel like, it's sitting here on my dock next to Steam. It's like the first time I've felt like there's a really strong, consumer game product that's going to do a good job of curating this mad space. So wanted to touch on that as well.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this section up. But hopefully that provides a really interesting watch list for people. We mentioned in our top fives, Ember Sword, Avalon, Aurori, Cambria, Shrapnel, Dead Drop, Illuvium, whatever CCP Games is working on, Lattice, and then bonus pick for the Hyperplay platform. So I think, yeah, I'm excited for all of those and to check them all out. So I think it's the next era of where all this is going is going to be pretty exciting. One other thing I wanted to talk to you today about, Piers, before we play a game and some of the closing minutes is founders. You obviously, as an investor, spend a lot of time with founders, and founders are naturally the most critical piece of investing in early stage startups. And, many people know about standard known traits of what makes for great founders. But also, the world is changing, technology is changing, and the way people organize themselves is changing. And your investing work is often focused on the intersection of all of that change. So my question for you is, are there any new traits or patterns you're seeing in today's best founders that maybe separate them from times past?
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of touched on it in saying that, things are changing. The scope and rate of change, right, is so insane. I think one of the things that we say we're sort of like, actively seeking is just high integrity people that are really building for the end game. It's like when you draw the curtains and spend your time getting in the weeds and thinking through, thesis formation, like where do I really see this like 5, 10, 15 years from now? It's like whatever those things, I don't care what you're investing in, but it's just particularly true in sort of crypto and the future of games and whatnot. It's like making sure that those people are kind of philosophically aligned with that. I think is just like the most important thing that I've really been thinking through, and I think it is different in like crypto in particular because there is so much. Not tribalism, but divergence of opinion on how this should evolve, right? Everything from like the governance aspects to actual technological decisions, like everyone has really different views. And so it can be super hard to like, find those people that, across time. I mean, I know that things obviously evolve differently and change, and it's like hard to really predict the exact order of events and whatnot. But I'd say, finding those high integrity people that are building for the end game, sort of as you see it. I think shout out to Jose, our head of labs, actually on the Delphi Labs side. I think they've done an incredible job. I mean, maybe we'll touch on it later, but just of scoping out how they see things unfolding, the key areas where it's like deficient in projects or infrastructure, actually putting out, ideas that they think need to be built, and like almost like having people gravitate towards those as well has been really cool to see. So yeah, I definitely think that's a big one.
Awesome. And before we hopped on, I asked you to come up with a list of 3 or so examples of modern day founders that you are seeing absolutely crush it right now in different ways. These aren't necessarily your like 3 favorite founders. I know you have a bunch of favorite founders that you work with, but I was just curious, like, could you share like who some of these people are, what makes them special in today's changing environment, and maybe what we can learn from them?
Totally, yeah. I think, one that I always love to mention is Robbie from Immutable. I know you guys have spent a bunch of time with Immutable, but he's just surprised me on so many occasions with his truly unapologetic and relentless hustle. Like he, has moved mountains since I've known him. So it's been awesome to see. Another one, when you asked the question that stood out is someone I've had the pleasure of knowing for a few years now, but we've actually, recently invested in what they're working on, which is Ed Sarchi from Geppetto AI. They're working on sort of 3D generative stuff. And he's just got this amazing ability to really hone in on like what is sensible to like innovate on and be creative around, and understand that in a space that's obviously as dynamic as spending any time anywhere near AI, figuring out what you should like leave to others, like the open source community, to build, and like trying to laser in on which the key components are to really like pull together. And then beyond that, just, tying together a very multidisciplinary team that you probably wouldn't expect all to come together, but is like this really awesome concoction for what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, he's another one that stands out for sure. I then think Will Wainraub, who runs Cryptoys, it's called. He's someone who I honestly don't spend as much time as I should with. We caught up recently, and it was awesome. But just from when we first connected, and he first told me about this idea he had, it was just this like insane clarity of vision. It's like not necessarily the most like complex idea in the world. It's just like very well defined, and his ability to kind of, as I say, that clarity early on, and the fact that that vision still remains intact, although obviously there's slight deviations along the way, has been amazing to see on the execution side. I don't know whether it counts in terms of founder, but we touched on CCP already, but Hilmar, right? I mean, obviously the original founding of CCP was 25 years ago or whatever now. Hilmar is just one of the most amazing brains around games I've ever had the privilege of connecting with. He's just some kind of like video game philosopher Viking to my mind from Iceland. He's pretty special in terms of just the again, like lucidity, all of those sort of insights that have been gleaned from making some incredibly difficult decisions across that 20 years of running the same economy, the same game, the same instance. Like the amount of like high pressure, like high implication decisions that they've had to make in terms of like, rolling back servers or not, or like doing things which many times completely piss the community off. Like, I think it takes a certain type of character to be able to do that. Obviously there's more people that were consulted in those decisions, but I think he's distilled all the insights from that in such an amazing way. And then, the desire to sort of embrace new tools and sort of innovate, right? Like, these guys looking at the space in the way they have been and really like soaking up everything they can. Like something tells me whatever they produce is going to be a winning formula already, right? They've really gone super deep. So those are a few. And then one other I'd like to shout out quickly before we move on is Brooks Brown from Nor, who's sort of pioneered this whole play-fi thesis, which we've touched on before. I think conceptually, in terms of thinking from first principles about how this technology can be used around games, it's one of the most exciting sort of visions that we've come across for sure. And a long way to go in terms of actually seeing it come to life. But I think, as I say, conceptually, like enormously exciting, and very, very eager to see what comes.
What's the 10-second pitch for PlayFi for those who don't know? So
effectively, it's looking at it's hard to do in 10 seconds, but
you can take more seconds.
it's all about kind of the sanctity of these core game loops, right? And how money and any monetary aspect should never ever touch these core game loops, right? All of that should basically happen on the periphery. It draws on a lot of inspiration from the sports model, right? So in soccer, you don't have people who can, pay for power-ups to run quicker on the pitch or whatever. All of the way that entire industry is monetized is around the periphery through, gambling, merchandise, broadcasting, etc. And so they're basically building the infrastructure to facilitate monetization like that in video games. Their higher end sort of ranked game modes are focused on this idea that risk-free gameplay has like ruined gaming, right? These infinite respawns, it's like lost all meaning as a result. And so in many respects, you can kind of frame it as this Web3 blood sports, right? So people who are the highest competitors who enter these tournaments, if you die, you're out. You're like wiped for the whole season, wiped for the whole tournament. It's this idea of introducing real stakes and making, gameplay meaningful through that again. And I think that's a super powerful idea. And I think, all of the things like provenance that are afforded by crypto become super interesting in this like new arena of esports where, you might own the Tombstone NFT from the first ever PlayFi tournament in, the year 2024, and it like perpetuates it, or rather it survives across time. So I think there's so much exciting stuff in there. It's well worth digging into for people looking for some interesting ideas to sink their teeth into.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. And also thanks for sharing your thoughts on those founders. One of my favorite parts about hanging out with you and talking to you, Piers, is that you hang out with all of these people and you're able to kind of like gleam and distill a lot of the just like the really interesting and cool insights from the people who are like on the most bleeding edge into like what's new and interesting and what we have to look forward to. So I hope other people found that interesting, and I'm sure your answer is probably going to change ever so often too as the world continues to change. So we'll have to check back in the future. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to a game called Buy, Sell, or Hold. Nothing here is investing advice, just to be clear, but I'm going to toss out a bunch of random ideas or concepts or ecosystems or what have you. And I want you to give me your level of bullishness or bearishness on that idea. Is what I am saying a buy, a sell, or a hold? And then feel free to, provide a little bit of why. This will be a bit more lightning round. So we probably won't dwell too much on any one of these, although we can poke in on anything interesting. And you also have no idea what I'm going to throw at you. So this is going to be fun. So to start, we'll start with an easy one. Buy, sell, or hold God of War Ragnarok DLC?
Buy, for sure.
Why?
Why? Okay, sorry. I thought you said we're not going to dwell on them. I absolutely,
a little bit.
I absolutely love those games. I think, Corey Balrog is like such an amazing director. I think that first 2018 God of War gripped me in a way very few games have. The Last of Us and God of War are S tier in my mind. I think they're the best two, narrative games ever created. That really took me on a journey as like gaming as a cinematic medium. I will say I thought Ragnarok was somewhat. It felt very samey. It felt like more of the same from the 2018 one, but I loved it so damn much, the original one, that I loved pouring loads of hours into that. I actually dropped it after about 15 hours and then picked it up and finished it again, but excited to see what comes from there. I just think like unparalleled in terms of visual storytelling, and I really, was invested in those characters.
But you think the DLC is going to happen? I know it didn't happen for the first game.
I think it will. Okay. I'm holding out for it anyway.
Okay, cool. So that's a buy. Buy, sell, or hold the Solana games ecosystem?
Buy. I'd say I don't. My current portfolio definitely doesn't reflect that, but I think there's been so much exciting stuff happening there. I think the bustling NFT ecosystem has been really cool to see. And whilst I think I would probably describe the Saga phone as a sort of relative flop. It's been pretty poorly reviewed. I think directionally it's super interesting, right? Actually engineering your own like hardware ecosystem and all the interesting distribution aspects that come with that. So maybe bullish Solana mobile stuff if they can get that off the ground, but it's a tall order. So I'll say buy/hold.
Okay. Buy, sell, or hold the Epic Game Store becoming the main distribution hub for Web3 PC games?
I'm going to say hold. I'm not sure exactly the difference between hold and buy here, but I'm going to say hold. I think obviously they're, out of all like big companies I know, like their perceived willingness to really lean into like open ecosystems and all the amazing stuff that comes with that. Like I really think that they are, very much on it, but it's just so much of what can be really exciting about these games is like a big gap up from enabling third-party blockchain games to push stuff through your store to like actually leaning into, like on-chain reputation systems, like the ability to actually tap into this amazing sort of social graph of users, if you like, to do targeted airdrops as a marketing technique, all of this kind of shit. Like I don't see them doing that anytime soon. And when I say anytime soon, I mean for the next 5+ years, let's say. And therein lies an opportunity. So let's see. I'm going to say hold on that one. Let's see.
Okay, cool. And just to clarify, by hold, like if the idea were a stock or a token, you'd be putting your money in it because you're bullish. You think it's going to happen. And a hold is probably like you're unsure. Maybe you have some tendency to lean one way or another, but you're waiting for more information. You got questions.
Cool.
So I think that's a fair answer for that one. Buy, sell, or hold Fortnite?
Buy. I just think, that ecosystem, the Epic Games flywheel, that account system, like that's not going anywhere. I think UEFN rolling out recently has been absolutely nuts to see. I think looking at stuff like Project 5, some of the biggest streamers in the world coming together to leverage UEFN to build their own game, to invite community feedback, all the things that we harp on about in crypto, they're actually, replicating a lot of that in that space. I think, just the advantage, the permanent advantage it's going to have in terms of being at the very forefront of the entire Unreal ecosystem is nuts. I think the IP universe they've concocted is completely next level and isn't stopping anytime soon. Again, as more TV shows and movies start integrating this stuff. And lastly, I've got giant bags in terms of skins and V-Bucks. I've still got like 60k V-Bucks in there, man. It better continue its advance. But no, I think they recently released in the Unreal Developer Conference that they still had like 70 million monthly actives or whatever it was. So I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I think they're very innovative, and I think like just seeing obviously UEFN's one thing, but also seeing how the game's evolved into zero build mode being more dominant. Loads of these interesting creative game modes. Like it's just like you can get lost in that game still. The mechanics are dope. Everything looks beautiful. Yeah, bye.
Sweet. Buy, sell, or hold. Major Western publishers announcing real Web3 games in the next 12 months.
How do we qualify major? I'm gonna say I'd probably say sell or hold sell border. I don't think it's happening in any meaningful way anytime soon.
Okay. Buy, sell, or hold. AI having a larger impact on the games industry than blockchains.
It's going to be way harder to quantify. It's also going to happen concurrently. It's really hard to say. I'd say hold on that one. I think it's doing amazing shit. I think it's giving small teams insane leverage. I think it's hard to isolate so much of what's going to be exciting about AI to just AI, as in creator tooling broadly is just completely collapsing. Like the ability for a single developer to build something that's utterly mind-blowing. It's not just AI driving that. So I'm going to say hold because I'm unsure.
Sounds good. And as a quick aside here, just because I'm curious, I know you mentioned investing in, I think it was Geppetto, the company.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like Delphi, you're spending some time on AI stuff too, even beyond just some of the Web3 roots. Want to comment on that change of focus at all quickly?
Well, absolutely. I think projects like that you could deem to be very adjacent, right? Like there's going to be some sort of overlap in the way that we traditionally invest in ththings. But yeah, I mean, this is undoubtedly like one of the most exciting forces to be unleashed, ever. And it's like, a big part of my time over the past few months, maybe longer, has been spent, trying to get smart on that space, understand how this shit works, understand, who's doing interesting shit. I still think understanding like how and where value capture happens is like, who knows? It's really difficult. But I think amazing teams that have a super clear vision, not about trying to pioneer nuts technology, but like figure out what's actually fun, what's actually what's beautiful. How can we make experiences that are like engaging and moving, like leveraging these new tools? Like that's a much clearer thing to be able to take a swing at than, investing in key sort of AI infrastructure. I'd say like, if I were investing in key AI infrastructure, I'd be deferring to people who are much more in the weeds, have the network, who are much smarter. But I fundamentally believe that there's a really exciting intersection between crypto and AI to be had. Very surface level basic things like, cryptographic authentication of media as deepfakes become more rampant and they start to, what was it? Someone released a video, an AI made video of the Pentagon getting blown up the other day, and some stock swung a bunch. And then turns out that some people traded that news, and then someone had actually spoofed the whole thing to begin with. It's like the whole thing's a mess. There's stuff there. There's stuff to do with, obviously like trying to coordinate distributed compute networks in terms of, GPUs and whatnot. Like there's a lot of exciting stuff coming. There's like zero knowledge machine learning stuff. Like how can you actually teach models without revealing information? Like I think there's a massive intersection there. So that's something we're trying to get smart on. And, we'll definitely be deferring to much smarter people on more core stuff. But fascinating time to be alive. Every day as a privilege.
Absolutely. Well, let's get back to buy, sell, or hold. Buy, sell, or hold. A fully on-chain game breaking out, and let's call it like at least a semi-mainstream way before 2025.
hold. I want to say buy, but it's like, as I say, just like state of the art in terms of UX. There's a long way to go, and I think this is where the real wizards are, spending time like innovating on the infrastructure. Lattice, who I mentioned, just put out this framework for actually building on-chain applications, which solves a lot of the technical hurdles. So I think this is very much like builder territory for the next few years. So I'm going to say hold.
Okay, sounds good. Buy, sell, or hold land in the metaverse.
I mean, I've never really been that excited about just vanilla land stuff. I think there's lots of cool shit that could be done. I think there are cool like token models you can build. I think the idea of doing stuff like dynamic land models. There's one project called Nifty Island, which actually should be launching later this year, or at least some playable stuff. And basically, they allow you to collateralize your plot of land to determine how large it appears on a map. I think models like that kind of make sense, and there's like tons of things to experiment with. But just like vanilla land as a concept, this like virtual real estate gold rush that we saw, I've never really thought it was that interesting. So I'm going to say sell.
Okay. Would tend to agree. Buy, sell, or hold the Meta Quest 3 and Apple's XR headset, which is being announced today as we're recording.
Yeah.
Being the turning point.
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. Buy, sell, or hold, like these devices being the turning point for XR adoption.
I mean, obviously, Apple has a history of coming sort of like relatively late to the game, but absolutely nailing it. I just don't think a $3,000 entry price, which is what it's been reported to be, is like going to be that feasible for like more mainstream consumption. I think obviously the very tightly linked kind of software hardware pipeline that Apple has is going to unlock some truly insane shit. And I think for many people, it's going to be like that next wave of like aha, sort of like holy shit moment with this stuff. And also, by the way, just ARKit, which they've been rolling out, using the LiDAR sensors and stuff in phones. Like they're building like this insane ecosystem that I think is going to unlock some really powerful experiences. But I don't know whether this is the inflection point all the way back to the Oculus Kickstarter. I've been like, this is it. And it never is. The Meta Quest 3 specs look nuts. Very impressed. I didn't even realize that it was like 2020 that the Quest 2 released. So that's actually a long time when they're churning through how many $1 billion a year on R&D. I salute our comrades at Meta for putting all that money into the space. I think that probably like, I don't know, let's say like 50 to 100 million headsets rather, they might be able to sell, but I don't think that really qualifies as like inflection point yet. I still think content has to catch up even to where we are right now. And it still feels like too many people are kind of, you use the thing for a month and love it. And oh my God, it's amazing. Get all your friends to buy it. And then no one logs into it again. I still feel like we're there probably for another couple of years.
Yeah.
So sell. Yeah.
Okay. Would tend to agree. Still excited to see what all this is going to be, and still going to put money into into things to play around for sure. So I'm buying the product, but I think I agree with you on the sell point more broadly.
Totally.
Buy, sell, or hold the latest lingo, free to own.
I don't know. I try not to like overly index on the exact nomenclature that people keep inventing and churning through. I think directionally it like made a lot of sense in terms of like a marketing tactic, like growth hacking thing. I think fundamentally the idea of distributing NFTs for free to users as like a hook, like an engagement way, is like a very sensible and interesting onboarding mechanic that I'd say buy on. I think everything graduating towards like us referring to free to own like we do, free to play or whatever, like absolutely not. And I'm really excited to see what Limit Break, obviously as kind of the pioneers, are doing in this space. But honestly, felt a little underwhelmed after the whole sort of Super Bowl advert and whatnot. Like, I'm excited to see what comes later this year in terms of like token standard innovation and stuff they've been working on. They're building a lot of cool infrastructural pieces, which I'm liking the look of. So let's see. So in summary, buy the idea of free distribution of NFTs as like an onboarding mechanic, and then sell the name catching on, and hold Limit Break.
There you go. That was a very, very well-rounded answer. And maybe something that's nice that I've been thinking about too is it's been a while since we've had one of these new terms pop up. Free to own actually popped up quite a while ago, and I feel like if this were a year or two ago, we'd already be like 3 terms later beyond it. So I don't know what that says about the space or anything, but I think it's time for something. Someone needs to come up with something new.
We'll have to put our heads together.
Yes, let's do it. One last one for you before we start to wrap up. Buy, sell, or hold any of the top 10 games by NFT transaction volumes staying on that list in 3 years. And so quickly, the list from a couple weeks ago, it was Other Deed, Block Lords, So Rare, HVMTL, Gods Unchained, Coda, Pixelmon, Axie Infinity, and The Sandbox.
In 3 years?
Yes. Will any of those stay on that top 10 list?
I'd be on the border of buy, but probably, yeah. I'd probably say buy. Yeah, I think there's at least one in there that has a good chance of it, but I won't say which.
You won't say which? Oh, that was gonna be my follow-up. That's okay.
Fine, I will. I think it would be So Rare. I think So Rare is just like anchored themselves on a very sensible model. It's like, not shooting for the moon, doing anything crazy that's going to alienate people. I think they're obviously anchored around sports, in particular soccer is their first sort of one that they're focused on, which is like, for some reason, billions of people are obsessed with this thing and watch it all the time. So yeah, I think they've got a really good chance of sticking around, to be honest.
Okay, well, actually, one more since we're on it. Then we'll move on. Buy, sell, or hold the Bored Ape Yacht Club gaming ecosystem. And I'm asking this because I've heard a bunch of different takes on it. Curious what yours is.
Honestly, it's not something I've ever been particularly enamored with. I think the coolest thing for me to see was just, the actual dollar value of the prize pools in that very basic game that they put together. But even that got hacked and people were exploiting it and whatnot. I think the demo that they did with the improbable stuff was cool to see loads of avatars running around, but I'm not entirely sure what the actual core game loop's going to be that actually drives retention over time. Obviously, they're very well funded and have a lot of smart people in the arena now. So I'd love to see something really cool come out of it. But I'd say, my gut feel on it still is that it's a bit kind of overhyped, maybe.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, thanks for rolling with that game with me. It's fun to get your quick takes on a bunch of stuff across the full tech gaming Web3 ecosystem there. Before we wrap up, I do want to spend a couple minutes talking about Delphi and specifically just what's going on at Delphi that's new and interesting, especially in the world of games and kind of the intersection with Web3. Anything exciting the team is cooking up over there?
Yeah, so on the gaming front, we touched on it earlier, but have a bunch of the kind of companies that we backed, starting to approach soft launches and more playable stuff. So actually got everyone together for a sort of internal portfolio session the other day and walked through, I think it was 7 different topics of core pillars that are everyone's kind of having to confront, right? Everything from token listings and regulatory advice to balancing these economies to the infrastructure and scalability solutions and so on. So I think that was really exciting to see what a insanely talented group of people there is and what a privilege it is really to be, trying to figure out what happens next with all of them. So that was super exciting. I think part of what we're going to do around more of these sort of soft launches happening as well is actually try and spin up a few more streams on Twitch. I think this content format of playing through things with a founder and talking through design decisions is super cool. So I'm excited to start toying with that. And then, obviously keeping up our coverage in terms of deep dives and whatnot broadly. So that's what's going on the Delphi gaming side. And then, broadly at Delphi, research business has a ton of cool shit being dropped all the time in terms of in the portal, these kind of, no code, low code chart builders, interesting ways to incorporate real-time charts into reports so you can see how a thesis has played out since it was actually written. A bunch of interesting community sort of driven stuff that's going to be introduced as well. So excited to see shit dropping all the time there. And then on the labs front, I think it's actually today the cohort of people who are moving from the hackathon into the accelerator is sort of being announced. I touched on it earlier on, but yeah, effectively put out, these kind of RFPs, if you like, but requests for projects instead of proposals. And yeah, all these key sort of primitives and pieces of infrastructure that the labs team thinks is kind of missing from the space. And so I think that's a really cool way of, again, like attracting builders to ideas and like actually helping with the ideation process, because there's a lot of amazingly talented people out there, but, figuring out where to even start and knowing who's building what is really tricky. So excited to see what comes from that. I think that's running for a few weeks before the final finalists are announced. And then, yeah, on the venture side, we're sort of deploying as ever. Super excited to have so many sort of gigabrains around the table, making sure we don't stray too far from the path of righteousness. And so, yeah, continue to be excited about everything we're doing there, across gaming and beyond. And yeah, it's just a privilege to have lots of smart people in the ring, most people with, proper skin in the game. So I think that's a pretty important piece of building the kind of relationships that we want to with founders, right? Is sort of investing your own capital is a different lens through which to kind of explore all of this through. And I, really enjoying it.
Awesome. Well, as I've told you, Piers, I've always been impressed and inspired by what the Delphi team has built across all of the dimensions you all operate in. So definitely rooting you all on from the sidelines and excited to see where all of this is going to go next for you all. To wrap up, just final question, Piers, if anyone wants to reach out, where can they find you?
On Twitter, Piers Kicks. I'm still probably most active on Twitter, yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, awesome, Piers. This was a ton of fun to roll through all of this today, and hopefully a bit of a lighter tone on some of the Web3 topics in particular for our audience. And hopefully you all listening had a lot of fun as well. So Piers, it's always a pleasure to chat and learn from you. Thanks for coming on.
Likewise, man. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed today's episode, whether on YouTube or your favorite podcast app, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, or give a 5-star review. And if you want to reach out or provide feedback, shoot us a note at podcast@naavik.co or find us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Plus, if you want to learn more about what Naavik has to offer, make sure to check out our website, www.naavik.co. There, you can sign up for the #1 games industry newsletter, Naavik Digest, or contact us to learn about our wide-ranging consulting and advisory services. Again, that is www.naavik.co. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.